Lucas Smith and I were bound by a business marriage, with no feelings involved. He never touched me, and I never took the initiative. Half a year later, Grandpa Smith grew anxious and forced us to drink a tonic. Then he shut us in the same bedroom. I curled up in a corner, muttering under my breath, "When there's no love between two people, nothing you drink is going to change that." Lucas tugged at his tight collar, his Adam's apple bobbing. His voice came out low and strained. "Monica Garcia, it works pretty well on me." Half a year after the wedding. My belly still showed no sign of life. My mother was beside herself. "Monica, why don't we go see a traditional doctor and take some herbal medicine to regulate your body?" I was terrified of Chinese medicine. I hurriedly confessed, "Even that won't help. Lucas Smith hasn't even slept in the same room with me. Where is this baby supposed to come from?" My mother froze, her eyes suddenly full of pity. She didn't bring it up again. I thought the matter was over. I never expected her to turn around and tell Grandpa Smith. The old man had been longing for a great-grandchild for years. The moment he heard, his temper flared. That very night, he summoned us back to the old house in a hurry. Leaning on his cane, his brows knotted tight. "You're 27 already. You still don't know what really matters." Lucas only smiled faintly. "Grandpa, this isn't something you can rush." After a brief stalemate, Grandpa waved a heavy hand. "Forget it, I can't get through to you. Just drink it and go to sleep." Lucas looked at the bowl of brown liquid, his brows drawing together, but he still tipped his head back and drained it in one go. Droplets slid down his Adam's apple, the sight almost blindingly distracting. Before I could recover, the housekeeper came in carrying another bowl. She said, "Madam, you have to drink this too." I didn't dare disobey my elders. I shut my eyes and gulped it down. Only then did Grandpa nod in satisfaction and tell the housekeeper to see us back to our room. As soon as the door closed, I instinctively curled up by the edge of the sofa, my fingers twisting the hem of my shirt. My voice was tight. "Lucas, what did Grandpa just make us drink?" He shot me a cold look. "I don't know." I turned my head away, refusing to look at him. I couldn't help muttering under my breath, "When there's no love between two people, nothing you drink is going to change that." Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Lucas tugging again at his tight tie, his Adam's apple working. His voice was low and hoarse with restraint. "Monica Garcia, it works pretty well on me." Before I could snap out of my shock, he had already turned away. A moment later, the sound of running water drifted from the bathroom, mixed with muffled, ragged breaths. Half an hour later, Lucas finally came out. Droplets clung to the ends of his hair, and the hastily thrown-on pajamas gaped at the collar, hinting at the lines of his chest. I stared, dumbstruck, until he spoke in a hoarse voice. "I'm done. Go take your shower." I still didn't move, just stared straight at him. Sensing something was off, he frowned slightly. "What's wrong?" An unfamiliar heat was coursing through my body. I bit my lip, and the grievance slipped out before I could stop it. "Lucas, why don't you want to sleep with me? Am I not pretty enough, or is my figure not good enough?" He clearly froze, his pupils contracting. Then he stepped forward, his tone cautious. "Where do you feel unwell? I'll call a doctor." A rush of nameless anger surged up instantly. I shot to my feet and stormed into the bathroom without looking back. I dawdled in there for a full hour before I dared to come out. I thought he would have gone to sleep long ago. I didn't expect him to still be standing right at the door. "Do you still feel unwell anywhere?" "No." Only then did he nod and turn to leave. Not until the next morning at the breakfast table. Did Grandpa ask with a squinty smile, "Did you sleep well last night?" I bit my lip and kept my head down, saying nothing. Lucas suddenly lifted his gaze, his expression solemn. "Grandpa, please don't do that again." He paused. "We don't need those things." As soon as the words fell, the table went dead silent, everyone's ears flushing red. Lucas's tone was suggestive, making it sound as if we were doing perfectly fine and didn't need any enhancers. But we both knew very well what the truth really was. After that incident, Lucas went on a business trip to High City. I stayed in my studio all day, just trying to keep myself busy. I wasn't exactly heartbroken about his coldness. Just a little unwilling to accept it. In North City, everyone knew the Garcia family's heiress was beautiful and talented. Wherever I went, I was always surrounded by people. Everyone said this marriage between the Garcias and the Smiths was a perfect match, a union made in heaven. So the more polite and distant Lucas was with me, the more unwilling I felt. I was in the middle of brooding when my phone suddenly rang. Angela Rivers's excited voice burst through the receiver. "Monica, want to go out for drinks tonight? I have earth-shattering gossip for you." The moment I heard gossip, my spirits lifted. I grabbed my bag and headed out the door. By the time I arrived, Angela had already gone through a round of drinks, her cheeks flushed. But she was still clearly sober. The moment she saw me, she dragged me into a corner. Lowering her voice mysteriously, she said, at a get-together a few days ago, I ran into one of Lucas's college classmates. Guess what he told me? At the mention of his name, my heart tightened for no reason. I blurted out, don't tell me he had some white moonlight in college who went abroad. Angela burst out laughing before I even finished. You're half right. She blinked at me. But Lucas's white moonlight didn't go abroad, he married her. I froze. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. You mean? I'm that white moonlight? Angela nodded emphatically. My palms grew slightly damp as I unconsciously tightened my grip on my bag. You must have heard wrong, or you were drunk. We did go to the same university, but he was 3 years ahead of me. By the time I enrolled, he was about to graduate. We barely had any interaction at all. Seeing the disbelief on my face, Angela grew anxious and shook my arm. Monica, you're my one and only best friend. Why would I lie to you? Seeing her so worked up, I could only confess softly, I've been married to Lucas for half a year, and he hasn't touched me once. Even when Grandpa Smith made him drink that tonic, he'd rather take care of it himself than be with me. Angela's eyes flew wide at that, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Our conversation ended there, in the stunned silence on her face. By the time I got home, it was already 10 o'clock. I kept saying I didn't believe it, yet I curled up on the sofa and found myself replaying those words over and over. Maybe the alcohol was finally kicking in. At some point, I drifted off right there on the couch. When I came to again, I felt myself falling into a warm embrace. The sudden weightlessness made me panic, and I instinctively burrowed toward that warmth, seeking something to hold on to. Then a familiar voice murmured low by my ear, I'll carry you back to bed. In a haze, realization jolted through me. It was Lucas. In an instant, all my drowsiness vanished. I scrambled out of his arms, my feet barely touching the ground before I stumbled back a step. Even my words came out tangled. Why, you said you wouldn't be back until Friday. Lucas stood where he was, as calm and distant as ever. I finished work early. He paused, then suddenly took a long velvet box from his suit pocket and held it out to me. Puzzled, I opened it. Inside lay a pale blue gemstone bracelet, resting quietly on the velvet. Before I could say anything, Lucas had already taken it out with deliberate care and lowered his head to fasten it around my wrist. The cool touch slid across my skin. I couldn't help asking softly, how did you know I like this style? His hands didn't pause, his voice even. I've seen you paint it often. At 3 in the morning, the world outside was utterly silent. It was as if the night itself bewitched me. I suddenly lifted my eyes to him. Lucas, are you in love with me? The moment the question left my lips, his fingers, which had been working at the clasp, trembled. Even his breathing grew heavier. But in the end, he didn't answer me. He only straightened up and tucked the edge of the blanket around me. It's late. Go to sleep. His voice was low and gentle, giving nothing away. Then he turned and left the bedroom. I sank into the soft covers and lifted my wrist. The sapphire blue stones glimmered faintly in the darkness, like that autumn dusk before our wedding. Back then, my father had his eye on both the Smith family and the Rice family. He pushed 2 photos across the table toward me. He began to analyze slowly. Lucas has outstanding looks, but his temperament is too cold. Dennis Rice has a gentler personality, but his appearance is ordinary. However, from a business point of view, I didn't wait for him to finish. I cut in, I don't want to hear it. I choose Lucas. My mother happened to be walking over with a fruit platter. Hearing this, she chuckled. See? I told you, this girl only ever judges by appearances. My parents were businesspeople who put interests first in everything, but when it came to me, their only daughter, they were indulgent. Seeing that my mind was made up, they didn't try to persuade me further. It was just that before my father had time to give the Rice family a heads up, Dennis actually asked me out to dinner in private. I thought it would be a good chance to make things clear face to face, so I agreed. That night, I had just taken my seat in the restaurant and hadn't even decided how to start the conversation when the doorbell sounded and Lucas walked in. The autumn night was chilly. He wore a black overcoat, with a faint mist of dampness on his shoulders. Dennis was the first to react. Unhappy, he said, I asked Miss Garcia to dinner. Mr. Smith, what do you mean by showing up uninvited? Lucas gave him a brief, indifferent glance and didn't respond. Instead, he walked straight up to me, his gaze steady as it landed on my face. But his tone left no room for refusal. Monica, choose me. In the shadow beyond the reach of the light, the hand hanging at his side was clenched just slightly, a thin sheen of sweat dampening his palm. I looked at this man who had suddenly barged in, as if he were determined to win me at all costs. A mischievous urge rose in my heart. I asked, why should I choose you? Only then did he sit down calmly, meeting my eyes head-on. Word by word, he said, marry me, and I promise I'll be faithful to this marriage and faithful to you for the rest of my life. As for being cold, that's still better than someone who offers his warmth to anyone. As he spoke, he pushed a stack of photos across the table. I flipped through them casually. Every picture was of Dennis wrapped up with some young model, intimate in ways that were unseemly to look at. At that moment, Dennis's face went from ruddy to chalk white in an instant, and he scrambled to explain himself. Lucas's gaze merely skimmed over the table full of fish dishes. He reminded him quietly, "She doesn't like fish." Dennis froze, his mouth opening and closing, at a loss for words. Taking advantage of that brief daze, Lucas's warm palm had already closed around my wrist, naturally guiding me toward the door. I hadn't even had time to react. All I could hear was Dennis's anxious voice behind us, intertwining with Lucas's steady footsteps. The private room door closed softly at our backs. In a daze, I found myself sitting in the passenger seat of Lucas's Maybach. He drove slowly, and now and then a cool breeze slipped in through the crack of the window, sobering me up a little. I muttered under my breath, "You really did your homework on me." The corner of Lucas's lips lifted slightly, he didn't deny it. Looking at his flawless profile, I ultimately said nothing more. I only asked softly, "Where are you taking me?" "There's a beautiful new restaurant that just opened in the west of the city." He paused for a moment, then said, "I think you'll like it." I did like it. It was just that, back then, I couldn't tell whether what I liked was that exquisite, beautiful restaurant, or the beautiful man sitting beside me. Even now, I still haven't quite figured it out. The tide of memory slowly ebbed away, and at last drowsiness washed over me. I turned over and closed my eyes as the night deepened around me. The next morning, when I woke up, Lucas was actually still at home. Biting into my sandwich, I looked at him in confusion. "You're not going to the office today?" He was leafing through a book, not even lifting his head. "Day off," he replied. Only then did I notice he was wearing light gray loungewear today. The sharp edge he carried in the marketplace, that ruthless decisiveness, had faded from him, leaving him looking unexpectedly gentle. I hadn't seen this version of Lucas very often. A cool breeze drifted in. Suddenly I remembered what I'd been thinking about last night. Before the wedding, he had fought for me so fiercely that I thought he must like me, at least a little. But his cold distance over the past half-year of marriage had made me feel that maybe he was only after that piece of land my father held in the west of the city. So I simply asked outright, "How is that project our families have in the west of the city coming along?" Only then did he lift his head at the sound of my voice. His expression was gentle as he said, "Everything's going smoothly." I lowered my head, took a sip of milk, and gave a soft mm. This project was a win-win from the start. Who cared whether there was love or not, as long as my family could benefit? I had just forced down that faint ache in my chest. Lucas suddenly leaned closer. His voice dropped a little, tinged with a hint of hesitation. "Are you busy today? If you have time, would you like to take a walk with me in Swan Lake Park?" This was the first time since our wedding that he had ever asked me out on his own initiative. My heart was thrown into momentary chaos. On one hand, I thought I should say yes. After all, we had a long life ahead of us, and we ought to at least try to grow closer. On the other hand, if this was only for the sake of the project, what was the point of such deliberate closeness? Before I could sort out my thoughts, Lucas had already reached out naturally, his fingertips brushing lightly at the corner of my mouth. "You got milk on you." His tone was ordinary, his gesture ordinary as well. But my heart still skipped a beat. I stared at him for a few seconds. Only then did I hear my own voice answer, "Okay." Just like when he took me away from Dennis's dinner that first time, I once again followed him out the door in a hazy daze. The lake in the park was calm and quiet, and after we walked for a while, my mood slowly settled. We strolled side by side, chatting idly about this and that. Only then did I realize that he and I actually had so much to talk about. When he saw me relax, Lucas casually guided me over to a patch of lawn and stopped beneath a plane tree. "Do you remember this one?" he asked softly, his gaze resting on my face. I looked up at the tree, rifling through my memories. Lucas didn't rush me, he simply waited quietly. In the end, I still shook my head. All I remember is that back in my freshman year, I often came to this park to sketch. As for this particular tree, I don't have any special memory of it. He laughed quietly, as if he'd expected that answer. Then he began to reminisce for me. "Once, you were painting under this tree, and I was resting on the other side. You mistook me for someone crying and quietly handed me a tissue." At that, my heart gave a tiny jolt. Some corner of my memory suddenly loosened. That afternoon, the sunlight had been beautiful, and the tree's shadows were swaying. I'd caught sight of a silent profile in their dappled shade. He was sitting with his head lowered, his shoulders slightly slumped, and I'd thought he was sad. So I quietly placed a neatly folded tissue on the stone bench beside him, then hugged my drawing board and slipped away on tiptoe. I had never imagined that person would be Lucas. Now, the memory came back to me in sharp clarity. That quiet silhouette from the afternoon finally overlapped with Lucas's face before my eyes. I lowered my gaze. "Sorry," I said softly. "I didn't recognize you." Back then, we had only met a few times at business functions, and we'd barely exchanged a handful of words. To me, he was just a blurry figure in a crowd. Lucas gave an easy little smile. But his tone held a faint, barely perceptible grievance. "It's all right. You've never really seen me anyway." My heart gave a small tremor, and I wanted to press him further, but he had already shifted the topic as naturally as breathing. That night, when we came home, I opened the master bedroom's walk-in closet and froze. Several of his black, white, and gray suits and shirts had somehow slipped in among my brightly colored dresses, quiet, yet impossible to ignore. I was still staring when Lucas appeared in the doorway, holding a pillow in his arms. His voice was gentle, his eyes carrying a hint of inquiry. "Monica, from now on, can I move into the master bedroom?" I found it inexplicably baffling. I couldn't help snapping at him softly, "Weren't you the one who insisted on sleeping in separate rooms at the beginning?" He didn't answer directly, but walked into the room and set his pillow down neatly beside mine. Then he spoke slowly by way of explanation. "We'd just gotten married then. We barely knew each other, and I was afraid you wouldn't be comfortable." I watched his back in loungewear as he moved about. My mouth said, "Oh," in a stubborn tone. But inside, I was happy. I just carefully hid that little burst of joy. He didn't say anything more, either. Not until bedtime, when he brought over a cup of warm milk and set it gently into my hands. I took it and cradled it between my palms, the warmth seeping into my skin through the cup. But I didn't drink it. I only lifted my eyes and stared at him without blinking. Lucas had changed into a black silk pajama top with a deep V-neck, outlining his broad shoulders and narrow waist. Under the warm light, the sight was distractingly dazzling. He was my husband in every rightful sense, yet after half a year of marriage I still hadn't had him. It was enough to keep me wide awake. A thought stirred in my heart, and I softened my voice. I called to him in a sticky sweet tone, "Hubby." His body stilled for a second, his gaze falling onto my face. Meeting his eyes, I gently pushed the cup a little closer to him. "Will you feed me?" The tips of his ears flushed red in an instant, but he still did as I asked, sitting down and taking the cup, then lifting it carefully to my lips. I sipped it in small mouthfuls, while his eyes rested on my eyelashes, quiet and intent. When I finished the last drop, he reached out and ruffled the top of my head. His voice was low and soft. "Good girl." People who are praised always can't help wanting to push their luck. So I leaned forward, gently swung a leg over and straddled his lap, looping my arms around his neck. With my lips near his ear, my voice came out soft and cottony. "Then do I get a reward?" His breath hitched, and his hand moved toward his pocket on reflex, as if he were about to pull out yet another bank card. I knew that reaction far too well. I quickly pressed his hand down, tipped my face up toward his, and leaned close enough that my breath brushed the warmth of his skin. "This is the kind of reward I want." Before the words had fully fallen, the last bit of restraint in his eyes shattered. Lucas suddenly lowered his head and kissed me, with the urgency of someone who had been holding back for far too long, like a traveler crossing a desert finally finding sweet water. Our breaths tangled together, and it wasn't until both our cheeks were burning that he finally drew back slightly, panting as he tried to steady his breathing. After a moment, he buried his face in my shoulder, his voice muffled. "There's a business banquet tomorrow night. Will you come with me?" By then, I was already dizzy from his kisses, in no state to voice a refusal. I simply melted into his arms, gave a soft nasal and took that as a yes. The next evening, he came home early to pick me up. He personally took me to get my hair and makeup done, then walked into the banquet hall with my hand tucked securely in his arm. I'd thought it was just an ordinary business dinner, that at most I'd be accompanying him to meet a few important clients. I never would have imagined that this glamorous banquet was, in fact, a trap laid especially for me. The hosts of this banquet were the Jordan family. And the Jordan family's younger son, Alan Jordan, was my first love. We'd been university classmates, close in age and from similar family backgrounds. Back then, our relationship had caused quite a stir in Beijing. Pretty much everyone knew about us. Later, because our personalities really didn't mesh, we broke up on good terms. After graduation, I joined my family's business to learn the ropes, while he went abroad for further study. From then on, we lost all contact. It wasn't until recently that he finally came back with his degree in hand. Friends in our circle had been telling me the news one after another. I treated it like any other old piece of gossip, heard it and let it pass. I hadn't expected to see him again so soon. Alan stood in the center of the dance floor in a perfectly tailored gray suit. The youthful greenness between his brows had faded, in its place was a touch of calm, effortless composure. I couldn't help tightening my arm around Lucas. I asked softly, "Are you planning to work with the Jordan family?" He turned his head slightly to look at me. His gaze was steady. I don't have that in mind for now. I was about to ask more when a business partner approached with a glass of wine in hand. They began talking shop, and it wasn't convenient for me to stay, so I took the initiative to release his arm. I'll go sit over there for a bit. Just then, I spotted Angela in a corner. Lucas inclined his head slightly, his gaze lingering on my face for a moment. His voice was warm. All right. Don't go too far. I nodded and turned to walk toward Angela. She had already seen me and immediately dragged me to her side. Lowering her voice, though she could hardly hide her excitement, she whispered, Monica, did you see your first love? Alan is way more handsome now than he was in college. I shot her an amused look. Do you like him? I can introduce you on WeChat. She punched me, indignant. Get lost. Even rabbits don't eat the grass by their own burrow. After fooling around, she leaned in closer, her tone turning serious. Be honest. Do you still have feelings for him? You kept saying Lucas is cold to you. Now that Alan's back, if you want to cheat, I can help you cover for it. The hall was loud with voices, and she forgot to lower her volume. That one sentence landed, unerringly, in the ears of Lucas, who had just walked over. Lucas's expression didn't change, he was still holding a delicate plate of desserts. Angela fell silent at once, nervously tightening her grip on my hand. He acted as though he had heard nothing, setting the plate down naturally in front of me. You didn't eat much tonight. Have some first. I still have things to discuss. You two go on talking, I'll come get you when it's over. I nodded, saying nothing. Only after he walked away did Angela lean in, flustered. We're doomed, we're doomed. Did he hear that just now? Is he going to pick a fight with you tonight? I shook my head, my gaze landing on the plate of desserts without reaching for any. Instead, I picked up the champagne beside me and took a sip. My voice came out low. He won't. He doesn't care about that at all. Angela could tell I wasn't in a great mood, so she tried her best to dig up other topics. We chatted in fits and starts. I didn't know when Alan had slipped into the empty seat beside me. I only noticed him when I finally came back to myself and turned my head, and he gave me a somewhat strained smile. I gathered my composure and greeted him softly. Long time no see. He looked straight into my eyes and murmured, Congratulations on your marriage. Beside us, Angela sensed the awkwardness in the air. She rushed to smooth things over with a laugh. Oh, she's been married half a year already. That doesn't really count as newlywed anymore. President Jordan, if you'd come back earlier, you could have at least had some wedding wine. Alan lowered his head, the corner of his mouth lifting in a self-mocking curve. You're right, he said quietly. I really did come back too late. For a moment, the air felt frozen. I was about to tug Angela to her feet when Alan spoke up first. Is Lucas good to you? I thought about it seriously. Over the past 6 months, he had been distant and polite, but when it came to what I ate, wore, and used, he had never shortchanged me. That attentive care surpassed even my father's. So I nodded and answered softly, he's been pretty good to me. Alan's brows drew together slightly, a faint bitter smile tugging at his lips. So, I really don't have any chance at all anymore. Seeing him like that made me feel a little uncomfortable as well, so I softened my tone. Alan, we've been apart for a long time. I let go of it a long time ago. In fact, from the moment I proposed the breakup back then, I had already completely let go. If two people aren't suited to each other, no matter how deep the feelings, they will eventually be worn away by endless arguments. Alan wasn't someone who liked to dig into the past. Once he saw how clear I was, he switched topics naturally and began telling funny stories from his years studying abroad. The atmosphere gradually lightened. Angela was laughing so hard she could barely stay upright, and I couldn't help laughing along. Before we knew it, half an hour had passed. When Lucas returned, he walked right into the scene of us laughing and talking together. Nothing showed on his face. He simply came over and called to me softly, Monica, we should head home. I picked up my bag, said goodbye to Angela and Alan, and followed him out. He remained calm the whole way, and I even began to think that maybe he really didn't care about my history with Alan at all. It wasn't until we got into the car that I realized something was off. The air around him was oppressively heavy, his jaw clenched tight, and he didn't say a word. From the rearview mirror, the driver sneaked a careful look at his expression. President Smith, are we going straight home? He asked in a low voice. Lucas kept his eyes closed, his 10 fingers laced together tightly, as if he were suppressing something. After a long pause, he finally gave a quiet mm. I had rarely seen him like this. In all the time we'd been together, he had always been gentle and composed. I guessed that maybe the business hadn't gone well. Since he didn't bring it up, I stayed silent too. Only when the black Maybach melted steadily into the night did he suddenly speak. You looked very happy tonight. I didn't really understand what he was getting at. I simply followed his words and asked, but you don't seem very happy. Was the business talk unsuccessful? Lucas finally opened his eyes. Those peach blossom eyes that were always so calm now fixed themselves deeply on me. His voice was low and hoarse. My wife's white moonlight has come back to the country. Should I be happy about that? His question caught me off guard, and a wave of grievance rose in my chest. You were the one who brought me to the banquet. Don't tell me you didn't know Alan would be there? And besides, you knew about me and him long before we got married. Before I could finish, he suddenly leaned forward and pressed the partition button. The dark panel rose slowly, sealing off the back seat into a private space. I instinctively shrank back a little. We're still on the road, I blurted. Don't get any ideas. He only leaned in closer, a hint of moisture shimmering in his dark eyes. His voice trembled faintly. Baby, could you stop liking him? It was only then that I belatedly realized Lucas was jealous. For a second, my heart skipped a beat and my brain nearly shut down. My fingers slid unconsciously into his cool hair. My voice came out soft. I stopped liking him a long time ago. The moment the words left my mouth, the dampness in his gaze was instantly replaced by another emotion. Hot, urgent, like that out-of-control kiss from the night before. His Adam's apple bobbed, his voice rough. Then, do you like me? My heart was pounding like a drum, and my cheeks burned. He glanced at the tips of my ears, flushed red, and let out a quiet laugh. It brushed across my heart like a feather. Flustered, I turned my head away. I don't. Lucas didn't get angry. If anything, the smile in his eyes and at the corners of his lips only deepened, lingering there for a long, long time. Half an hour later, we got home. At the entrance, I kicked off my torturously high heels in exhaustion. The moment my toes touched the floor, he scooped me up and set me gently on the shoe cabinet. His hands closed around my waist, and his warm lips brushed over mine, slow and lingering. He teased me until I couldn't take it anymore and wrapped my arms around his neck of my own accord. But he drew back a little, a dark current moving in his eyes. Did you kiss him like this too? I didn't want to indulge his baseless jealousy. Tilting my head, I bit his lower lip, light but not too light. Lucas's breathing hitched, and this time he didn't hold back. He kissed me hard, deep and fierce, with a force that allowed no resistance, almost stealing all my air. Even in those fleeting pauses to catch our breath, he still wouldn't let it go, his lips pressed to the corner of mine as he asked in a low voice, between me and him, whose kissing is better? I tried to turn away, but he gently cupped my face in his hands. His gaze burned as he stubbornly waited for an answer. Helpless, I could only confess softly, I've already forgotten what it felt like to kiss him. At last, a smile bloomed in Lucas's eyes, and he lowered his head to kiss me again, more tender and lingering than before. In the haze of heat and confusion, I reached for his shirt buttons, but my fingers were shaking so badly I couldn't get them undone. He let out a low chuckle, his breath warm against my ear. Monica, are you sure? He murmured. I didn't answer. I simply took his hand and guided it slowly downward. His fingertips stilled for a moment, and he couldn't hide the laughter in his voice anymore. All right. Then let's go to the bedroom first. Lucas swept me up in his arms, and I clung to him like a koala as he walked steadily toward the bedroom. The moment my body sank into the soft mattress, his warm chest pressed down over me. His breath burned against my ear. His voice came out rough and low. Turns out we really don't need that tonic between us. At that, the memory of that night flashed in my mind, and my cheeks flared even hotter. I buried my face deep in his chest, refusing to look up. Seeing me like this, Lucas gave a quiet laugh and stopped teasing me. With one hand, he deftly undid his shirt buttons. The night grew deeper, and the room filled with warmth. It was almost noon by the time I finally woke from a heavy sleep. When I opened my eyes, Lucas was still lying beside me. One arm was propped under his head, and with the other hand he toyed idly with the ends of my hair, his gaze deep and filled with a tenderness I couldn't quite put into words. My eyes slid inadvertently over his bare shoulder, and the faint red marks there made my face heat up all over again. On reflex, I tried to yank the blanket over my head and hide. But he easily pulled me, blanket and all, back into his arms. He let out a low laugh. What is it? I burrowed deeper into the covers, not knowing how to answer. After a pause, Lucas spoke again. His voice carried that husky edge of someone who had just woken up. Are you hungry? I ordered from your favorite private kitchen. As if to respond to him, my stomach growled loudly in betrayal. There was no way I could stay in bed after that. Wrapped in the blanket, I sat up, planning to head to the bathroom to wash up. The moment I stepped in, I froze. There was already toothpaste on my toothbrush, and the cup beside it was filled with warm water. That silent thoughtfulness flowed through me like a warm current, washing away the last traces of sleep. Just then, Lucas's voice drifted in from the doorway. No rush. I'll wait for you outside. With my mouth full of foam, I could only nod at him. 10 minutes later, when I walked into the dining room, I found the entire table nearly covered with takeout containers. On closer look, every single dish was something I loved. Starving, I no longer cared about my image. I sat down and started eating with gusto. By the time I was about half full, curiosity finally bubbled up. I picked up a piece of sweet and sour pork rib and couldn't help asking, there's something I've always wondered. Do the private investigators you hire really dig deep enough to find out every little thing someone likes to eat? Lucas was calmly ladling soup into a bowl. At my question, his hand paused for a moment. He didn't answer right away. He only set the filled bowl gently in front of me. Then he lifted his eyes, looking at me with a gaze complicated by too many layers, helplessness, tenderness, and a faint, elusive bitterness. He sighed quietly, his tone laced with a hint of self-mockery. Monica, do you still think I needed a private investigator to learn these things about you? I ducked my head over my soup, feeling guilty. My voice grew smaller and smaller. When I asked if you had a crush on me before, you didn't admit it either. Lucas frowned slightly, falling silent. Unwilling to let it go, I pressed on. Before we got married, you went out of your way to fight for me, so I thought you liked me. But after the wedding, why were you so distant? He drew in a deep breath at my question. His gaze dropped. I'm sorry. I was afraid that if I pushed too hard, you'd end up hating me even more. I picked up another rib with my chopsticks. Casually, I asked, when did I ever say I hated you? The words had barely left my mouth when I froze. A long-buried memory suddenly resurfaced in startling clarity. It was June of my freshman year. The school was holding a graduation ceremony for the seniors. Since most of the graduates were from the business school, we freshmen had been told to go and fill the seats. Lucas, as the outstanding student representative, was giving a speech on stage. It was a scorching June afternoon, the sun brutal overhead. But he took his time, speaking for a full 20 minutes. A whole group of girls squeezed and jostled beside us, just to get a little closer to him. I was so hot and irritable that I couldn't stand it anymore. I muttered to Angela, I seriously don't get what's so great about him. Is he really better looking than a celebrity? That happened to be overheard by one of Lucas's fangirls. She didn't say anything right then. But that evening, she came looking for me on purpose. Angela and I were in the cafeteria, eating and watching a drama on my tablet, in a perfectly good mood. The girl suddenly leaned in, pointed at my screen, and said, I seriously don't get what's so great about this. Is it really better looking than Lucas? With that, she tossed her hair and walked away. I was so angry I couldn't even finish my meal. Angela rushed to comfort me. Don't be mad, don't be mad. Everyone just has different taste. So I hugged my tablet and decided to leave. When I looked up, I happened to meet Lucas's gaze. He was standing in the doorway of the cafeteria, caught in the shifting light and shadow, his suit jacket draped casually over his arm, as if he'd just finished some social engagement. When he saw me, he paused for a moment and gave me a slight nod. At the time, he and my father had a project together, so that greeting was probably just out of politeness. But I was still fuming and pretended not to see him. I grabbed Angela and walked straight past him. In the moment we brushed shoulders, I couldn't hold it in and grumbled softly to Angela, I really can't stand him. A gust of wind blew through, and Lucas froze for a second. I didn't think anything of it. I never imagined that one sentence, blurted out in a fit of temper, would stay with him for so many years. Thinking of that memory now, I hurriedly set my chopsticks down. I'm sorry. Back then it was because of that girl. I stumbled through an explanation of the misunderstanding. After listening, Lucas was stunned for a moment, then finally let out a long breath. A gentle light rose in his eyes. So that's what it was? Something in my chest softened. But a new question followed. Still, I was really rude back then. By all logic, you should have hated me for it. He shook his head slightly, his gaze calm and steady on me. When you like someone, and she hates you, all you can do is keep reflecting on yourself. When he finished that sentence, my heart skipped a beat. Lucas had finally admitted, out loud, that he liked me. Love, born from who knows where, running deep ever since. Propping my chin on my hand, I couldn't help my curiosity. Then when did you start liking me? Lucas scooped me up and carried me over to the sofa, as if he were giving it serious thought for a moment. I don't remember the exact time. I only remember it was one autumn. It was autumn now, too. I nodded, answering softly, autumn really is a season made for falling in love. He let out a quiet laugh. Why don't you ask me why I like you, he countered. I lifted my chin at once, putting on a show of confidence. I'm this great. Anyone who truly understands me is bound to like me. Lucas didn't argue. The smile in his eyes only deepened. But I reached out and held his face in both hands, looking into the deep, dark pools of his gaze. Actually, that answer, I said gently, I want to spend the rest of my life figuring it out. As soon as the words left my lips, Lucas's eyes grew faintly red, a sheen of moisture glimmering there. It was the look of someone whose long-cherished wish had finally been answered. He drew in a deep breath, fighting to steady the surge of emotion, and gently took my hand. "Are you full?" I nodded, quietly waiting for him to go on. "Then let's go out," he said. He stood up, a soft light in his eyes. Puzzled, I asked, "Go out for what?" He bent down and brushed a quick kiss over my lips, laughter tucked into his voice. "To fall in love." Another autumn had come. The sweet smell of candied chestnuts from the street corner drifted on the cool breeze as he naturally laced his fingers with mine, his palm dry and warm. We walked slowly down a path carpeted with fallen leaves, neither of us saying a word. In that moment, it suddenly struck me. Our love had probably been destined to take root and sprout in this season long ago. And from then on, in every autumn that followed, it would ripen gently, year after year.